I never considered myself a superstitious person. Ghost stories, cursed objects, haunted houses, they were all just good fun, figments of imagination. That all changed when I inherited the family heirloom, a seemingly innocent locket, after my grandmother passed away. I remember the day clearly. The funeral was a somber affair, with relatives I hadn't seen in years shedding tears over the woman who'd been the matriarch of our family. My grandmother was an enigmatic figure, always full of tales of the old country and its many superstitions. But it was her eyes that I remember the most, eyes that seemed to hold the weight of secrets never spoken. As the eldest grandchild, it was my duty to go through her belongings and organize them. I was expecting to find nothing more than old photographs, letters, and perhaps a few trinkets. But among the dusty boxes and yellowed papers, there it was, the locket. The locket was beautiful, an intricate piece of craftsmanship. It was shaped like a heart, made of tarnished silver, with a delicate pattern of vines and flowers engraved on its surface. As I held it in my hands, I felt an inexplicable chill run down my spine. Brushing it off as just the cold of the attic, I slipped the locket into my pocket and continued sorting through the rest of her things. That night, as I lay in bed, curiosity got the better of me. I retrieved the locket and attempted to open it. It took a bit of effort, but eventually it clicked open. Inside, there was a faded photograph of a woman I didn't recognize and a lock of hair, now brittle with age. Beneath the photograph, there was an inscription in a language I couldn't understand. My heart raced as I traced the letters with my finger. The first strange occurrence happened that very night. I dreamt of the woman in the photograph. She stood in a fog-shrouded field, her face a mask of sorrow. She reached out to me, her eyes pleading. I awoke in a cold sweat. The image of her face burned into my mind. The days that followed were a blur of unsettling events. Objects in my apartment began to move on their own, lights flickered without reason, and a cold draft seemed to follow me wherever I went. The locket, always around my neck, felt like a weight pulling me down. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I decided to visit my grandmother's oldest friend, Mrs. Kroll, who was known for her knowledge of the old ways. Her small cottage was filled with the scent of herbs and the soft glow of candlelight. She greeted me with a knowing look, as if she expected my visit. When I showed her the locket, she gasped and made the sign of the cross. "That locket," she said in a trembling voice, "is cursed." She explained that the locket had belonged to a woman named Helena, who had lived in our village many years ago. Helena had fallen in love with a man who was betrothed to another. In her despair, she turned to dark magic to win his love, but her actions backfired, leading to her untimely death. It was said that her spirit was trapped in the locket, bound by the curse she had cast. Desperate to rid myself of the locket, I asked Mrs. Kroll how to break the curse. She gave me a list of rituals, each more complex and terrifying than the last. But one thing was clear: I had to confront Helena's spirit directly. That night, I prepared for the ritual, my hands trembling with a mix of fear and anticipation. I laid out the items Mrs. Kroll had given me on the floor: a bundle of sage, a bowl of salt, a vial of holy water, and a small, rusted knife. Each of these objects had a specific purpose, each one a tool to aid in confronting Helena's spirit. I started by drawing the necessary symbols on the floor with chalk, creating a protective circle around me. The symbols were intricate and unfamiliar, each stroke imbued with ancient power. As I worked, I could feel the air grow heavier, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Next, I lit the candles, placing them at the 4 cardinal points around the circle. Their flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the walls, adding to the growing sense of dread. The light danced and shifted, creating the illusion of ghostly figures moving in the darkness. With the circle complete, I took the bundle of sage and lit it, allowing the smoke to fill the room. The scent was pungent and calming, meant to purify the space and ward off any malevolent entities. I walked around the circle, waving the sage and reciting the protective incantations Mrs. Kroll had taught me. I then took the bowl of salt and sprinkled it around the perimeter of the circle, creating an unbroken line. The salt was a barrier, meant to keep out any unwanted spirits and provide an extra layer of protection. As I poured the salt, I whispered a prayer for safety and guidance. With the preparations complete, I sat in the center of the circle and retrieved the locket from around my neck. Holding it in my hand, I felt its cold metal against my skin, a constant reminder of the curse I was about to confront. I took a deep breath and began to chant the incantations Mrs. Kroll had provided, my voice barely above a whisper. The words were foreign and guttural, a language long forgotten by time. As I chanted, the air around me grew colder, and the candles flickered violently. The room seemed to close in around me, the darkness pressing in from all sides. I could feel a presence, a weight that settled over my shoulders and sent shivers down my spine. As the final words left my lips, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles in an instant. I was plunged into darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. In the silence that followed, I could hear the faintest of whispers, as if 1,000 voices were speaking at once. And then I felt her, Helena's spirit. The air grew thick with her presence, a palpable force that seemed to wrap around me. I could see her ghostly form shimmering in the darkness, her eyes filled with sorrow and anger. She reached out to me, her spectral hand passing through the barrier of salt. She spoke in a language I couldn't understand, but the message was clear. She wanted release, freedom from the curse that bound her. With trembling hands, I held out the locket, offering it to her. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I could feel the weight of her pain and longing. In that moment, I knew that the only way to free her was to confront the darkness within myself. Her spectral hand touched the locket, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, Helena was gone. The locket lay in my hand, now warm to the touch. I knew the curse had been lifted, and her spirit was finally at peace. The days that followed were filled with a sense of calm and relief. The strange occurrences ceased, and the weight that had burdened me was lifted. I kept the locket as a reminder of the ordeal, but I never wore it again. Though the experience left me with a newfound respect for the supernatural, I couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. The heirloom, once a source of fear and torment, had become a testament to the power of forgiveness and the enduring bond between the living and the dead. And so, I continue my life with a deeper understanding of the mysteries that surround us, ever mindful of the stories that whisper through the ages. It started with a doll. An old porcelain doll with glassy blue eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I went. I found it in the attic of the old house I had just moved into, nestled among a collection of forgotten toys and dusty boxes. The doll had a delicate, hand-painted face, and its dress was made of fine lace, now yellowed with age. I was never one for dolls, but there was something about this one that drew me in. Perhaps it was the craftsmanship, or the eerie sense of nostalgia it evoked. Either way, I decided to bring it downstairs and display it on a shelf in the living room. It seemed harmless enough. The first night, I woke to the sound of faint whispering. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the remnants of a dream. But as I lay there, straining to listen, the whispers grew louder. It was a soft, unintelligible murmur, like a conversation just beyond the edge of comprehension. I got out of bed and followed the sound to the living room. The doll sat there on the shelf, its eyes reflecting the dim light from the street lamp outside. The whispering stopped as soon as I entered the room, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. Shaking off the unease, I returned to bed, convincing myself it was just the house settling, or a draft playing tricks on my ears. But the whispers returned the following night, and the night after that. Each time, they led me to the doll, its glassy eyes staring unblinking into the darkness. By the end of the week, I was exhausted. The whispers seemed to grow louder each night, and I could no longer dismiss them as mere figments of my imagination. I decided to do some research on the house and its previous owners, hoping to find an explanation for the strange occurrences. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. The house had once belonged to a man named Heinrich Weiss, a renowned doll maker. He was known for his exquisite creations, each one a work of art. But as I delved deeper into his history, I uncovered a darker side to his story. It was said that Heinrich had dabbled in the occult, using dark magic to imbue his dolls with a life of their own. Rumors circulated that Heinrich's wife, Anna, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Some believed she had left him, unable to bear the darkness that had consumed him. Others whispered that Heinrich had trapped her soul within one of his dolls, a final act of possessive madness. The more I read, the more convinced I became that the doll in my living room was one of Heinrich's creations. The thought of Anna's spirit trapped within that porcelain shell sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I reached out to a local historian who specialized in the occult, hoping he could provide some guidance. He listened to my story with a mix of fascination and concern, and after a moment of contemplation, he offered me a solution. "You must perform a ritual to free the spirit trapped within the doll," he said, handing me a sheet of paper filled with instructions. "But be warned, it will not be easy. The spirit may resist, and the ritual itself is not without danger." That night, I prepared for the ritual. I gathered the necessary items: a candle, a piece of chalk, a bowl of salt, and a vial of holy water. I drew a protective circle on the floor with the chalk, placing the doll in the center. The candle was lit, its flickering flame casting long shadows on the walls. With the instructions in hand, I began the ritual. I sprinkled the salt around the doll, chanting the words of the incantation. The air grew heavy, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. I could feel a presence, a cold, malevolent force that filled the space. As I continued to chant, the doll's eyes seemed to glow with an unnatural light. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent than ever. They seemed to emanate from the doll itself. A desperate plea for release mingled with anger and fear. The candle flickered, and a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the flame. In the darkness, I could feel the presence drawing closer, pressing in on me from all sides. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to continue the incantation, my voice trembling with fear. As the final words left my lips, a blinding light filled the room. The doll seemed to shudder, and for a moment, I could see the faint outline of a woman standing before me. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, and her mouth moved as if trying to speak. Then, with a final, anguished cry, she vanished, leaving the room in silence. The doll lay on the floor, its porcelain face cracked and its glassy eyes now dull and lifeless. I knew the spirit had been freed, but the experience left me shaken. I buried the doll in the backyard, hoping to lay its dark history to rest. In the days that followed, the whispers ceased, and the house felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. I couldn't shake the feeling of having brushed against something beyond my understanding, a world of darkness and despair that lingered just out of sight. The doll maker's curse had been broken, but the memory of that night stayed with me. It served as a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown, and the secrets that lie hidden in the shadows. I should have never taken the mirror. It was an antique, its ornate frame tarnished by time and neglect. I found it in a dusty corner of an old thrift shop, half buried under a pile of forgotten knickknacks. The moment I laid eyes on it, I felt an inexplicable urge to bring it home. Little did I know, that decision would change my life forever. The mirror was exquisite, its surface covered in a layer of grime that only hinted at the beauty beneath. I spent hours cleaning it, meticulously polishing the glass until it gleamed. As I worked, I noticed intricate carvings on the frame, faces twisted in agony, their eyes wide with terror. A shiver ran down my spine, but I brushed it off as a trick of the light. Once the mirror was clean, I hung it in my bedroom, proud of my find. The first night, I slept soundly, undisturbed by the world outside. But the second night was different. I woke to the sound of soft, anguished cries, like whispers carried on the wind. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and scanned the room for the source of the noise. My eyes were drawn to the mirror. In the dim light, I could see faint shapes moving within its depths, like shadows trapped behind the glass. I approached it cautiously, my breath hitching in my throat. As I stood before it, the cries grew louder, more desperate. I reached out to touch the glass, and the moment my fingers made contact, the world shifted. I found myself standing in a dark, twisted version of my bedroom. The walls were cracked and decayed, and the air was thick with the stench of rot. The mirror stood before me, its surface rippling like water. I turned to leave, but the door had vanished, leaving me trapped in this nightmarish realm. Panic set in, as I struggled to find a way out. The cries grew louder, echoing through the room and filling my mind with a sense of overwhelming dread. I realized then that the faces carved into the frame were not mere decoration. They were the souls of the damned, trapped within the mirror for eternity. Desperate to escape, I returned to the mirror and pressed my hands against the glass. The surface felt cold and slick, like ice. As I pushed harder, the cries turned into screams, and I could see the faces of the trapped souls pressing against the other side of the glass, their eyes pleading for release. I tried to pull away, but my hands were stuck, held fast by some unseen force. The room seemed to spin around me, and I felt a crushing weight bearing down on my chest. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake, and that the mirror had claimed me as its next victim. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself slowly losing my grip on reality. The mirror became an obsession, a constant presence in my life. I could no longer sleep, haunted by the cries of the damned and the knowledge that I was doomed to join them. I sought help from every source I could think of: priests, exorcists, occultists, but none of them could break the mirror's hold on me. Each attempt to cleanse the curse only seemed to strengthen it, and I could feel my sanity slipping away with each passing day. Though I could still leave my home and reach out to others, the mirror's influence followed me like a dark shadow, its whispers and cries haunting me wherever I went. One night, in a moment of sheer desperation, I decided to confront the mirror head-on. I lit candles around the room and drew protective symbols on the floor, hoping to shield myself from its malevolent power. As I stood before the mirror, I recited an incantation I had found in an ancient text, my voice trembling with fear. The mirror's surface began to ripple, and the faces of the trapped souls pressed against the glass, their screams filling the room. I felt a cold, icy grip on my heart, and I knew that I was running out of time. With one final, desperate plea, I demanded that the mirror release its victims and end the curse once and for all. But the mirror had other plans. The glass shattered, sending shards flying through the air. I felt a searing pain as the shards embedded themselves in my skin, and I fell to the floor, writhing in agony. The cries of the damned grew louder, drowning out my own screams. As I lay there, bleeding and broken, I could feel the mirror's power consuming me. My vision blurred, and the world around me faded to darkness. The last thing I saw was the mirror, its surface now smooth and unblemished, as if nothing had ever happened. I am now one of the tormented souls, trapped within the mirror for all eternity. My cries join those of the others, a chorus of despair that echoes through the ages. The mirror stands as a testament to the horrors it contains, waiting for its next victim to fall into its cursed grasp. And so I remain, a prisoner of the mirror, bound by the curse that I could not cleanse. My only solace is the hope that one day, someone will find a way to break the curse and free us from this eternal torment. Until then, I can only watch and wait, a silent witness to the horrors that unfold within the glass.